issues of people carrying guns, killing each other. They're talking of issues of rights of women, rights of all kinds of people. Look at even Europe. With all the problems, all the history from the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, when they now started building the modern state system. They've come in 1640 now. It's a long period. But still, they are grappling with issues. I was ambassador in four of the most refined countries. And sometimes, because of the openness of those societies, I used to get communication for me to assess their governments. And there's still a lot of people think that things are not perfect. So the question is, conscious efforts have been made by every leader. I have taken time to study from Sir Tafawa Balewa to the present president, the president head of state. They've all made very conscious effort to build this country. None of them are slacked.
What would you say of the clamor for restructuring through federalism? These are terms and issues that appear not to want to go away, in spite of the fact that we're in the year 2020, 60 years.
No, restructuring, review of constitution, and those things are not amiss. They are not unexpected. Every country is continuously restructuring. Every country, without exception. It may not be an issue of putting one constitution and replacing it with another. But when there are parliaments, the parliaments are every day making law. Look at the European Union. From different countries, now they've come together almost as one single country in Europe. That's a major restructuring. They've changed their currency. Their currencies don't exist. They now have the Europe. They've changed their judicial system. They now have common health standards, irreducible minimums of education, of health, and of care for old people, and all kinds of things. Those are major restructurings. And that's why people look at Britain. They got into the Union. Then they said, oh, Brexit, let's get out of it. They now want to take over everything about our lives. So all those are restructured. Now, in the case of Nigeria, permit me to go a little bit back. Our constitutional evolution started in 1914, when Lord Lugard brought 1st of January everybody together. But a law had been made in 1913 to take operation from 1st of January 1914. And after that, it functioned until 1922, when the Hugh Clifford Constitution came into being. And that one operated for a long time until 1946, when the Authorial Constitution came into being. Then that had issues. And then we now had the Macpherson Constitution after Sir Macpherson. And now the Macpherson Constitution provided now for the regionalism. All this is restructuring. So it's not static. Change has been continuously going on. Regionalism now came in. But then Nigerian leaders were not satisfied with Macpherson. They said, no, they said, we don't want all this. We want a constitution that we can have our spaces among ourselves. Our leaders at the time, great men, Sadana of Sokoto, great men, the great Zik of Africa, great men, Chief Obafa, great men, Tony Nauro and Depabri and all the rest of them, Taka, Joseph Taka. So they now said, look, we still need to do things ourselves. So what did the British do? They said, okay, you all come to Ibadan and sit down and talk on what do you want? So in 1915, they went to the Ibadan conference and they sat down and negotiated among themselves. They negotiated and negotiated and negotiated, and finally they came up with a draft which became the Macpherson Constitution, the first draft. Then they were still not happy. So the colonial secretary in London, Oliver Littleton, invited them to London in 1953. All these big men with those kind of propeller aircraft traveled to London to go and sit down and negotiate. And the white man listened to them. And at the end of it, they agreed on a federal structure. 1954, they said, okay, we want a federal, we don't want too much hold of one on the other. Let's have a system that each of us can still have our spaces. Because these are the things that bring to restructure.
Some level of autonomy, if you like. Some
autonomy, and that was why, can you imagine that by the time we had internal self-government, when a man like the great Sardauna would have come to rule Nigeria, he preferred to remain in Kaduna. He said, no, let me stay here. You, Tafawa Balewa, those of you know Awada, you people go to Lagos and deal with Awolowo. And Chief Obafa Awolowo was in Ibadan, and remained in the Western region to take care of the West and sent other people like Akintola and co. to the Federal House to go and argue among themselves. What I'm trying to say is that there were arrangements that did not make the center so unwieldy. So people still had their space. So Sardauna could bring the North. The North was so much behind in terms of Western scholarship and Western education. But he focused on and brought the North at par, almost at par. I mean, today I was a Federal Permanent Secretary, and there are more Federal Permanent Secretaries from the North. There are more PhD holders from the North. This was because of that foundation. From Ibadan, 1950 to 1960, how many years? 10 years.
10 years.
To negotiate one constitution. 1966, the military came and put that work aside and now started experimenting their own. 1979, yes, they brought civilians to negotiate, but there were people with guns, waiting to say, look, don't go this way, don't go that way. 1979, the same thing. So what I think what people are now saying is that we have departed fundamentally from what our fathers agreed. And should we continue this way? Because what we have now is a constitution. It's working, but it's not working the way our fathers thought it should work. I think that is the whole idea of this clamor for restructuring.
As a political scientist,
yes.
If you say okay, you don't want the word restructuring.
No, I don't mind.
Maybe
but
it is belabored.
A lot of people don't like it.
Maybe it is belabored. But let's just use it for now. If restructuring or statecraft is a continuous affair,
yes.
and we have a standing National Assembly that has the powers, is mandated by the Constitution to review the Constitution, as it were, why wouldn't all these elements, groups, community groupings now use this very platform of the National Assembly that is empowered to effect any changes that they want?
Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, and even the 1999 Constitution guarantees the right of expression. People have the right to express themselves. You can't gag people. People have to say what they want to say in an orderly manner. It is if people get out of order that is wrong. So I think that there's nothing wrong. If the National Assembly has now come up and they've published some document to say we want to amend the Constitution, and people are saying, staying outside to say that we want restructuring, there's no problem. The National Assembly itself can also send an invitation to them. Hey, we hear you saying you want to change. Come, let's talk. We are giving you the opportunity to talk. There's nothing that is wrong by saying that, no, we are National Assembly. There are people we know that have been clamoring for restructuring. Invite them. So they're expressing their right of expression. And I don't think that anybody should feel offended by that.
But is it beyond personal interest? Because if we're still looking at nation building, the whole essence, let me borrow the word from Kudu, restructuring, the whole essence is for rebuilding a nation, for prosperity. So if it's beyond personal interest and it's national interest, what about strengthening institutions? Because we can't achieve nation building without strong institutions. Now, I'm talking about the three arms of government, and recently at the end of the ministerial retreat 2 days ago that just ended, the president warned that there must be he won't tolerate insufficient coordination, collaboration, and he wants to see synergy amongst MDAs if implementation of policies should be sustained. Now, what's your take on that?
No, the building blocks for any viable nation, any modern nation, are institutions. Institutions transcend individuals. And that is why we have to focus a lot on building institutions in Nigeria. So whether somebody is there or is not there, the institution can function like an autopilot. And that is what happens in a lot of democracies that have advanced more than us. The nation is not built around a personality. It's not a person, but it's the institution it represents, the presidency, the National Assembly, the judiciary, and other bodies that we have. So I think that it should be a collective commitment for good governance, for us to build institutions. Governance is about making life better for people. For life to be better for people, the institutions must be viable, must function. So the president has asked the ministers, who are his first line in terms of functioning properly, to build institutions that they're in charge of. And I think that for us, Nigerians, the rest of us, it's our collective interest to make sure that government institutions work. And when I was a permanent secretary, I used to tell some of my staff, there's a little bit of insularity in terms of people looking at government work as... I used to tell my people, that chair you're sitting, very soon you'll be out of that place. And somebody you don't like will sit there, and our children will come to sit on those chairs. So when people are in government offices, as a minister, as a permanent secretary, as a director general, they forget that this is an institution. I'm passing. It's a passing. I mean, I recollect there was a time just not too long ago that some of us were, quote, very powerful permanent secretaries. And now you're out and there are people there. And even for you to go there, I recently had a cause to go to visit somebody who was my assistant director. I had to take my time and wait until it was my turn. When he knew, he rushed. I said, oh, God. So we have to build these institutions outside of ourselves and allow them to function.
Well, a big follow-up to that. The presidential system of governance has been in operation from 99 to date.
Yes.
A very long time. And as far as the history of Nigeria is concerned, how can we model it to further create national cohesion and transparent governance for sustainable development? I'm asking this question because of your pedigree.
Yes,
a scholar, an author,
yes,
an academic, someone who has been permanent secretary in 2 powerful ministries, someone who has been the diplomat and ambassador.
I think that we sometimes think that democracy is an end that it's like cast in iron, and it comes down to us and we cannot tinker, we cannot change. There are certain fundamentals, but each country has to be able to build the best form of democracy that suits it. Look, Nigeria is a country, some people say about 200 and some ethnic groups, sometimes we say 300 and some even say 400 or 500 different groups have been. When I was having youth corps, there were 2 communities here, and they are totally, mutually unintelligible. They don't understand themselves. Even within a community, sometimes people don't understand themselves. So we are a very heterogeneous and diverse country. And and that is what our fathers tried to do. And we, in this modern setting, coming maybe about 60 years after 1960, when the first constitution came into being, we have to think and see how best we can format our own form of democracy. The presidential system is good, but we are not supposed to become slaves to a system that does not really reflect our realities. For example, people talk about Switzerland all the time, where they have 7 cartoons, and they came up with a formula. They said, look, but before that, they went through wars. They fought a lot of wars themselves. They have 4 languages. If you add the language of the gypsies, they have about 5 languages. And they now said, okay, let's have 7 cartoons. Every year we rotate power among them and operate. Look at the Indian Federation. There are union territories, there are federal territories, and they have a good formula where they work together. Or I give people the example of Israel. Sometimes they think Israel is a monolithic country, Jewish country, that everybody... No, it's perhaps the most diverse country. You have people who have come from Portugal, Portuguese, Russian Jews, German Jews, the Sherifa Jews from the Arab countries who speak only Arabic, and their way of life, their culture is Arabic. You have the Ethiopian Jews, the Falashas, who are blacks. And if you go to a place like Tel Aviv, you see that there's so much diversity. But then they have to now craft how best all these people can be one. And for us, the challenge is, and maybe that is the whole reason for the clamor of restructuring, is for us not to become forced to say we have a presidential system. And if the system is not working too well, we can tinker with it. I'll give you an example. And sometimes I think in my head, there was a case of a case in the Supreme Court that took 14 years to settle.
Nigerian Supreme Court?
Yes, Nigerian Supreme Court. 14 years to settle. You know, in the United States, states have their Supreme Courts. You go there. But the Supreme, 14 years to settle. And what was it? Over succession. Chieftaincy matter from Rivers State. Somebody died, but then the tradition says a new king has to bury the king that died before. And then, but then so many people, including somebody who was a federal minister, was contending for that position. So for 14 years, the remains of this man were in the mortuary, while the case was in the Supreme Court to be settled. I mean, these are local things, land matters, issues of inheritance, issues that... So we can have a system where at regional levels there may be some appellate structures that attend to these issues. So the Supreme Court becomes a constitutional court. Or this entire clamor about state police or regional police. Look, there are places where even universities have their own police and bear arms. But of course, these things have to be regulated under the context of a bigger federal structure. So I think that we don't have to think that federation or federal system, presidential system, means that we have to follow what is being done in France, we have to follow what is being done in America. We can sit down among ourselves. Look, democracy is about talking. You have to jaw. You know, I talk a lot with my friends in Abuja here from different parts of the country, and we spend a lot of time talking, drink tea and talk, and try to format what is best for our children.
Okay, let me take you to the book you
Yes.
wrote, Perspectives on Non-State Formation in Contemporary Africa.
Yes.
From what you're saying, it's all about oneness.
Yes.
Even before we look beyond Africa, you know, try to copy other system of government, what about, let's narrow it down to Africa from your book. I read a review of the book, and I believe you were trying to look at the oneness, how Africa can tap from each other. Now, where have we not gotten it right in terms of that non-state formation, in terms of integrity?
Where we did not get it right
You
comes...
want to say integration?
Integration,
Where we did not get
integration.
it right comes from the colonial government. When the colonial government started to allow political associations for people to come together, perhaps it's part of their own insistence on human rights in terms of allowing people to do what they like. They saw political formations, agrupations, in terms of ethnic background. Not just in Nigeria, but in Ghana, in Kenya, in Liberia, everywhere. People form political parties based on ethnicity. So the Northern People's Congress was essentially a political party of the people from the North, who were conservative. And even the NEPU of Aminu Kano were mostly people from the north, from Kano area. President Kano and Jigawa were from there. Then, of course, he later formed alliance with some people from the south. The same thing that NPC did with the Niger Delta people, formed alliances. So we formed, my people at my own side formed Niger Delta Congress, the Babri and Co. These groups were based on ethnic, and the action group started with Egba Omoduduwa, which was a coming together of the children of Oduduwa. And the colonial government perhaps at that time could have said, hey, no, your states, your new states shouldn't have such ethnic background. Go broad and get alliances. They didn't do that.
Maybe that was what the 1979 Constitution stipulated, or rather provided for, where it says political parties must cut across some number of states.
And that is why we now had the NPN, which to a large extent was broadly national in outlook, but with still a lot of strength coming from the NPC, because it was formed in Lagos essentially by people like Shehu Shagari and people, the late Meta Masule and Co, the old Makama Bida, the old structure. If I say Aliyu Makama Bida, that was the father of the group. They were the remnants who were left, who were not decimated by 1960 coup. They came together and brought in some of their friends. So there was still an ethnic origin, and I think that gradually we have to depart out of that.
So how can we achieve integration then?
The achievement of integration has to be by we the elite. We the elite must have a pan-Nigerian approach to dealing with issues.
Some elite consensus, like the Vice President Osinbajo is known to have been saying, the need for elites across the board to come together, have a common heritage, if you like, and a common focus?
Absolutely. No, I think at present, both the PDP and the APC have national outlook at present. The two main political parties have national outlook. The only spicing that has to come in, the two are center-right parties. Maybe we'll have some center-left parties or leftist parties that will be able to add to the geological spicing of the political landscape. But how to bring integration is more about the elite. We, the elite, seeing this country as our constituency. This country has to be our constituency. We have lived together. Let's not count from 1960. We have lived together from 1914. So we have lived together for more than a century as a people. And our values have become so mixed. And today, when it is Christmas, Muslims are celebrating Christmas, even from the north. And even in terms of our culinary attitude, what we eat now, we eat the same food. We are beginning to eat the same food. There was a time that I went to a federal government college, and immediately after the war, when our colleagues came from the north to join us, they did not know how to eat certain food that we were eating. Even things like plantain, dodo, it was alien to them, and they were more on grains. But today, all these things are eaten everywhere, and we are the same. We dress the same way. So we have become one, and I think it's a work in progress. We have to improve on it. We have to accommodate each other. There must be spirit of accommodation. You see, where people say, no, we don't want to accommodate you, then you are not sensitive.
Yeah, as a political scientist, certainly yes. We must pick your brains on the issue of conflicts.
Of what?
Conflicts.
Yes,
across the board. You
yes.
have the Boko Haram, the Niger Delta issues,
yes.
iPod.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? What paradigm do you think should be adopted to manage this conflicts?
No, the conflicts arise as a result of disaffection. Disaffection of various sorts, and we can't put all of them in the same basket because the conflicts, the origins, and the foundations are totally different. You've mentioned the case of iPod. iPod is mostly Igbos who feel that since after the war, 50 years after the war, we are not still in the mainstream. Mind you, for many years, no Igbo man was chief of army staff. After many years after the war, not that they were not qualified. And now people are talking about Igbo presidency. Some people say, no, you cannot be president. Why? Even the person from the smallest ethnic group can aspire to rule this country. So we can't just say you cannot be president. So there are still people that have fixated mind of 1966, 67, 68. No. Now, if you look at the Niger Delta crisis is the easiest of all the crises because it is resource-based. A lot of resources are leaving that place. And the impact, look, I come from a local government, Southern Ijaw local government. We produce perhaps about 20% of the oil. There's no road. If you come to visit me, we have to go by boat for about 2 hours. And there are some parts in my local government, you go 5 hours. Then you see the pipelines crisscrossing the place. And the people say, hey, wait a minute. Is this not our oil that is passing like that, or our gas? Let's go and blow it up. So it is impact. Impact to be created by the state governments, by local governments, and by the federal government, and the international oil companies. So there's a different situation. If you go to the situation with Boko Haram, it is a situation where people feel that we have a background that is spiritual, ideological. We feel that we should be allowed to express. What is said, Boko Haram? You speak Hausa. The Western education is evil. So that explains it all. So it is a case of trying to understand them from where they are coming. And that's why some countries, like I said, I gave the example of India, very complex, more complex than us. I did a study on India, and if you see some of my writings, I've done some deep studies on India. And there is so much diversity in terms of race, in terms of religion, in terms of culture, but they have to come up with a way in which to accommodate those people. So people have to be allowed to express themselves. Oh, even in the United States, there are people who are anarchists, who believe that what should obtain a state of anarchy. There are nudists who believe that people should be allowed to walk naked all over the place.
But
And
you know,
but the state accommodates them in a way that they don't impinge on other people.
But from what you're saying,
Yes.
it's all about interest. From these three aspects, you're breaking it down. And would you say it's as a result of a gap in human capacity development? Which is one area I know you're very passionate about. Now, if human capital development is well harnessed, as well tapped into, are we going to be having most of this crisis?
Yes, human capacity development is there. When people are enlightened, they're able to understand better. But there's also the issue of communication. Are we communicating enough? We have to, when decisions are made, they shouldn't just come down as if it's coming from God. We have to communicate with people. We have to explain to people why certain policies have to be made. There must be more communication. There must be more trying to make people who have divergent views to understand. Let's not be talking to ourselves, whether we're in government or we're out of government. You have to make people see your point of view that, look, if this is in our common good. So we have to educate people. Education is very important because, as it is commonly said, education opens the human mind. But while that is the scenario, you still have to communicate. Sorry, I have to refer to some of what I've done in the past. I've written on the importance of communication as one of the most important tools for integration in Africa, in particular. Communication. We have to be able to communicate positively, and that's the whole idea of negative communication. Where communication is based on threat, people become different. They say, oh, you want to force me? You want to do this to me? They say, okay, let's fight back.
Yeah, but government in its wisdom has come up maybe to answer to some of these imbalances with interventionist agencies, programs.
Yes.
For example, in the case of the Niger Delta, you have the amnesty program, and whereby I'm told 700 plus million naira have so far been spent on the amnesty program. And of course, in the Northeast, you have the Northeast Development Program now, which just kicked off, and you have several other of these intervention programs. But it appears these intervention programs are becoming another problem because scandals, fraud are emanating from them. So what is the way out?
No, I don't think intervention programs are a problem. Intervention programs are okay, and that is the question you asked. You know, when people feel aggrieved, genuinely aggrieved, yes, you have to do intervention programs to assuage their feelings and to be able to bring them at par in one way or the other. In the case of, yes.
Would you pin it to management?
Yes, there are management issues, but I think the problem with some of the intervention agencies is not even the people running them. The problem is the fact that there are provisions they've made, not in the law, not in the original law, but as guidelines for operation, where they say an intervention agency should operate almost on the basis of outside the public procurement process. You know, government departments have public procurement process. There is the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, which says, for example, that you don't spend money, you don't go and give a contract to somebody when there's no money. In fact, it's prescribed jail sentence. If you go and say, I give you a job to go and buy these lights and there's no money, yes, you can go to jail. It's just like giving an employment to a man without when there's no establishment. All those are in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Or to say at the end of the year, you just spend money. They say, no, what you spend by the end of the last 2 months must be on the average of what you spent the remaining 10 months. So when these bodies are allowed to operate on an emergency basis, the emergency situation should be contained through emergency procurement or special procurement. The Public Procurement Act of 2007 makes provision for special procurement, for emergency procurement, for then the normal procurement. Special procurement is, for example, if it is only you that produces these glasses and we must buy from you, then we can now buy only from you. We don't advertise. Emergency is because it's urgent. There's a flood. But if it becomes the norm, So day to day, even when there's no emergency, operating as emergency, then you create a room for abuse. I think that is a problem that some of these agencies.
So what that means, the National Assembly should come up with a law to
no, National Assembly does not need to come up with a law. There's a law already, Public Procurement Act 2007, which prescribes how you can go ahead and do procurement. But then these agencies, whether Notice Commission or Amnesty or whichever of them, have provisions that enable them to make procurement on an emergency basis. But let me I want to correct something on Amnesty. When people talk about Amnesty and 700 and something billion, let me tell you, today we produce about 2 million barrels of oil a day. Oil today, Bonny Light sells for about $41, $42 per barrel. If you take that in terms of the 2 million barrels, that's about $84 million a day, which translates to about 32 billion naira every day. Now, if you take it, 32 billion naira every day, if now they said Amnesty has so far consumed 700 and something billion naira, that is just about 10 days of oil production. 10 days of oil production for which we have forced our people to make sure that oil flows. You know, it's not
contended with the with the militants.
So it's not when people call that figure.
Our time appears to be running out, but there is this issue that I want you to quickly address: the issue of power. You are permanent secretary, Federal Minister of Power, and I'm told it was during your time that the privatization was effected. We have very limited time, but what do you think should be done? Because it appears the Gencos and the Discos that bought the power stations are not doing well.
Well, let me correct. I came into power in the middle of 2013, at which time the privatization has been completed. So, but we had to implement the privatization. Secondly, the privatization was not done by the ministry. You know, people don't understand, but privatization was done by Bureau for Public Enterprise, BP, and they sold the assets, and the ministry was represented by a director in the BP during the process. If the BP is going to sell, for example, a parastatal of NTA or one of your, then NTA must be represented. So we were represented, and I came in at that time. So we had to join BP to implement it. I think the problem was that there were certain expectations which followed the privatization. The expectation, it is clear in the document that tariffs will increase. It is clear in the document that so amount of power will produce and transmitted. In the documents of the privatization, those things were there. Then those things did not come to work. Tariffs could not be increased, it's sensitive. Increased tariff. Number two, that amount of power could not get to the people. Two reasons. Number one, the transmission infrastructure could not, even when you produce, you can't take. You know, if you manufacture something, there must be a bulk transporter that takes it to the next place before the distribution takes it. But then privatization took place, and a lot of power produced could not be transmitted. Transmission company has been working very hard to expand and so on. So that assumption could not be met. So the private sector found themselves who bought these assets, found themselves in a chicken and egg situation. We have bought plants, the power we were expecting to send out could not go out. Then another thing that was not taken into regard is the high level of electricity theft. 60% of meters are bypassed. It's a very big problem. 60% of meters are bypassed. So people put their money into a business, and rather than money come to them, the people disconnect and take power without paying for it. So sometimes even very important people, factories, entire factories. Now, the final problem was the fact that when they bought these assets, they borrowed money from the banks, which was not a very good model. They borrowed money from the banks. So they would sign contracts with the government that they were going to improve technology, they were going to improve on meters. But then, after they took over the assets, they could not collect money because there was theft. They now had to, they could not improve. So these are the issues that...
So in few words, what's the way out?
No, I think the way out is that the government, now they've come up with what they call, you pay for those who receive more power for 12 hours. You know, there's tariff increase, People don't actually, according to the arrangement, tariff increase was supposed to be twice a year, but they've been.
So a lot of people have frowned to that tariff increase.
No, people don't understand. The tariff increase is for people who live in places where there's electricity more than 12 hours. And it's not my duty. I don't know why these people don't talk to Nigerians. You have to communicate with people. That is what I tell people. You don't be insular. Tell people this is what... See, the tariff increase now is for people who receive more than 12 hours of electricity. But so if you live in Asokoro and if you live in Maitama, unfortunately, if you live there in a little room and Ambassador Gali is living there and maybe in a big house, they will charge you the same thing as they charge me.
But in one word, yes, before we let you go, do you see us achieving the 90% power generation?
You see,
in 2030?
it is a very simple thing. We have crossed the Rubicon in terms of power sector. The big, gargantuan problem, mammoth, that we could not, was privatization. Now it is in private hands. NERC is trying to now wield his stick and show more assertiveness. Then the other thing that we did not do, when we privatized, the World Bank took me, I was then permanent secretary, took me to Brazil, to Egypt, to India, who had gone through this route before, to see how they did it. And one thing that was common was that a lot of money came in from outside the private. The private sector was had opportunity to borrow money, cheap money, not money where you go and pay 15-20% interest, where you are paying maybe 0.75 or you are paying 1%, 2% interest. You pay over a long time for you to improve your technology, improve your network, and improve. So when this happened, at that time, we made suggestions to government. Look, we have to borrow money. But it was delicate, it was sensitive. They said, no, we can't do that. Now we are doing it. First of all, government gave 200-something billion, then 701 billion, then now 600 billion. So, but that is still not enough. But then let's not forget, in the GENCOs, or generational companies, the federal government still owns 20%, Nigerians. In the distribution companies, the federal government still owns 40%. You are part of the owners of Abuja.
So it is not a total privatization?
No, it's not.
Ambassador Igali, we may have to leave it there. Okay. Thank you so much for your insights in all these issues. Certainly, Nigeria has 60 challenges of nation building. There are so many strands to it, like we said much earlier at the introduction. Thank you so much for coming.
I should also thank you for having me.
Ruth Aguele, thank you again and for being part of this production. And the platform examined issues and developments on Nigeria as the country celebrates her Diamond Jubilee upon the attainment of political independence in 1960. Our guest, Ambassador Godnose Igali, a retired public servant, diplomat, author, and scholar, spoke extensively on national integration and sustainable development, and he stressed the need for working on the various building blocks for national unity. That's Platform. Thank you for watching. I'm Muhammad Kudu Abubakar. Bye for now.